Political analyst Professor Sipho Siepe joins us in studio. A very good evening to you, sir, and thank you so much for your time.
Good evening.
And now, what do you make of the establishment of a revolutionary electoral commission to deal with the issues of gatekeeping as well as manipulation of the electoral process?
Well, I think it's an acknowledgement by the ANC that it has a difficulty with this current system in terms of who gets deployed and how the election process takes place. But my concern with the Electoral College, which has not been fully defined, why you actually would need it and how it's going to work. And I've listened to some of the comments that said in a democracy, the ANC has to contend with the fact that you have people who are newcomers in the ANC, and they bring some tendencies that are not known within the ANC, and somehow these people are the ones who tend to be blamed. And but if you were to look at the history of infighting within the ANC and some of the squabbles, most of those squabbles have little to do with the people who have just joined the ANC. Mm-hmm. Those are squabbles that are historical. Some of them come from exile, some come from prisons, so effectively you need to diagnose where the problem is. But also there is this misguided notion that the ANC seems to harbor, to think that it can create a cadre that they were able to create under conditions of oppression, under conditions of democracy, where the people can compete for a position of power, and where there is also resources that are attached to that. That condition begins to shape the individuals. We now know of individuals who were very strong comrades, but in the context of democracy, they hate each other. They actually wish each other the worst things that are possible. So that is the reality of working and functioning in a democracy under conditions of freedom, that people are now free to do a number of things. And some of the people who have been found to have failed the organization are not newcomers. These are people who had been in the ANC for the last 40, 50 years. If you are to look at some of the people who even call themselves stalwarts, and you look at how they behave, some people have accused them of ill discipline. So this is not about how long you've been in the organization. What the ANC needs to do is to, instead of having this mythologizing about the past, and instead of romanticizing the past, it needs to ask itself, how does a party of liberation function in a democracy, and how does it tries to win people? Because what the ANC has been trying to do is also to expand. So you need to find mechanism of saying, what is the glue that holds us together? So that is more the fundamental issue. Then the second issue that they have is really, in a democracy, you start having people having different ideas. And you have, for instance, in communication, the ANC talks about the battle of ideas. The question is, which ideas are they representing? Because when you listen to some of the members of the ANC, even some of the stalwarts, when you listen to them, you can't make a distinction between whether they're speaking as members of the DA, whether they're speaking as members of the COPE, whether they're speaking as members of EFF. So there must be certain ideas that they themselves could say, these are what defines us. But when you have a broad church like the ANC and defines itself, and you have contradictions, you are going to have a lack of clarity. So far, the document talks about the battle of ideas, but it does not indicate which are the key ideas that are so different from the DA. If you're going to talk about social democracy, if you're going to talk about prosperous, non-racial, the DA will make the same claim, the EFF will make the same claim. Actually, what you find in the political spectrum, the EFF is the one that is much more clearer that it does not belong to this other group. For instance, if we take the concept of the NDP, which is the ANC's blueprint, and also government's blueprint on socio-economic issues, all the other parties in parliament agree to that. But the EFF is the only one that said, no, we don't agree with that. We don't subscribe to it. So when you have all parties subscribing to a particular document, it needs a far greater granular detail to make people understand why you are different. It can't be only on the basis of your history. We should be looking forward into the future and define our existence through that future. Yes, the past helps because it gives you a historical, social, and political capital, but that cannot be sufficient. Then you have the tendency of the ANC to use words like radical. I always say, a dog that is limping, you can call it tiger, you can call it lion. If it's, or you call it any other thing, it will still be a limping dog. So you can't, like they've done in the past, where they realize that the black economic empowerment is not broad-based. They simply added broad-based black economic empowerment. But they're just changing the name is not going to do that. You take something like social transformation. There's a now new language, they say radical socio-economic transformation. And when you try to listen, what is radical about it, you actually do not find that. So they need to, I think the branches of the ANC, now that the documents are out, need to pressurize and press the ANC to be much more definitive about where it stands. Even when it comes to the issue of land, the president was very clear about where he stands on land. But because of the contradictions and the contestation within the ANC, there's lack of clarity around that. Of course, the Gonongwan Enoch was able to say there are two elements. One is fair and equitable, which almost brings the market in, and somewhere without compensation, where you have land that is was bought illegally or stolen and all that, or is used for illegal purposes. But for the ordinary people, you need to be very clear whether are we going to get our land or not. That is a fundamental question. And you saw the EFF calling a bluff in Parliament to say, well, your president has said we need to make sure that we move fast. Let's see if we can test you on this. And the ANC as a whole voted against that. So that raises a number of questions about where it stands. So it's very important that these discussion documents, when they go out there, they need to be sharpened in terms of what the organization really stands for. And I found that the president's State of the Nation address and also the general aid statement of the ANC has introduced a certain element of radicalism in it. What the president did was simply to say, let us look at how we're fed in the economy. Yes, democracy, in terms of political democracy, and the elements of democracy in terms of elections and Chapter 9 and judiciary, that has been consolidated. But when it comes to the economy, we are not doing well. And what it means that we must come up with serious interventions. So the question is, are these documents talking to that sense of agency? Are they talking to that element of radicalism? Not militancy, but radicalism that the president talked about. And our sense is that there is an appropriation of words, but there's no sense of action that will lead to that particular change. 22 years down the line, actually Andile was saying, even if you give people a plot or you give them a house, that doesn't change the economic relations between black people and white people. You give somebody a house, you give them a tap, you give them the electricity, but he stays next to a white person who owns a mountain, who owns a river. So that does not change much. And this is what the black people are saying, that the struggle was about land, and we must see that expressed in the policies. Otherwise, when you have this timid approach, they know it will be another 20 years before there is an attempt to address the real challenges on the ground.
And now you've also mentioned that the branches now need to actually go out there and put pressure. But now there also has been an argument for trying to cut down the size of the NEC. What do you make of that?
Well, those are, I find that a Mickey Mouse suggestion. It's actually a lazy suggestion that you have two people, 4 people, and all that. What is most important are the issues. Are you addressing the issues? And if you add you subtract by 5 or by 10, that is not going to define what is on the table. The ANC has managed to get where it is. What they are actually saying is that the NEC as it stands is not functioning. But I don't think it's simply an issue of numbers. Some people could argue that the bigger numbers that you have can actually create far greater generation of ideas. All we have to do is how do we manage a party, because this is a national party that has or claims to have over 1 million people, and you need to be seen to be accommodating people at the regional level, in the class level, and all those things. And that might lead to a situation, but I don't think it is any more. The failures have nothing to do with the numbers. Let me put it that way. So this is a very weak suggestion. But anyway, that's for the ANC to make that decision.